We are recording. Okay, perfect. This is the first ever Truth Has No Sides podcast. We have tried multiple times and failed to get this ball rolling, but we are here today on the 10th of August, 2024 at 1 o'clock Mountain Time and I think 9 o'clock Patrick's time. I don't have a guidebook for all this podcast. I know you and I watch a lot of podcasts, but we've got some questions. We're going to go back and forth, Patrick and myself, and we'll figure out what we're going to entitle this first episode. But throughout the podcast, I'm going to do everything I can not to clear my throat as much as I just did. We're going to be speaking to healers, to people who understand consciousness, people who hate spirituality, people who don't even know what spirituality is. But we're going to bounce back and forth with a lot of very interesting people. And we're going to talk about the ups and the downs and everything in between. The first guest here is Patrick. He's in Germany, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I met Patrick, I don't know if it was 4 or 5 years ago, but prior to that, I had read a book that my teacher suggested called 1000. And it's kind of like Dr. Hawkins' book on the levels of consciousness. This guy behind levels, it was called 1000. The guy behind this book is by the name of Ramaji. And he breaks down the different levels of consciousness on this planet from 0 to 1000. And I was at that point, was very interested in raising my level of consciousness. First of all, I wanted to know where I was, and I wanted to know immediately how quickly I could raise it and how quickly I could get to 1000. And the only thing that wants to see their level of consciousness raise is the ego. So I was full steam ahead with the ego on my spiritual path, as most people are unaware of when they start their spiritual path.
I just wanted to say that's like kind of the baseline. That's where everybody starts out, I would say.
We all start out with the ego. We're goal-oriented. But I met Patrick after doing some sessions with Ramaji, a couple years with Ramaji, and I wanted to continue on my path. But I think I met Patrick through a friend of a friend who was working with Patrick. And we started doing some sessions together. I loved his energy. I loved everything about him. And I also loved that he was willing to do a lot of sessions with me day in and day out. Ramaji would only do one a week or one every other week, as I talk about in the book. Patrick and I started to experiment with just how aggressive we could get with the energy that we will talk about, the Shaktipat that we will talk about later in this call. But Patrick and I started doing some sessions together. And I think at one point we did 7 or 8 days straight. And that for a normal person, the amount of energy that Patrick can bring through an individual would probably kill him. I was doing enough energy healing with Patrick to kill an elephant. But we will go into detail about that later on. So Patrick, would you kind of just be so kind to let everyone know who you are, where you grew up, and stuff like that?
Yeah, so my name is Patrick Hauser. My last name was different, but I married a couple of years ago. I basically grew up in Germany. My parents met in England, so my dad is half Canadian, which also makes it a little bit more easy to speak with folks from America, Canada, UK, and, well, just English in general, which is nice. And yeah, I'm basically just your average dude with your kind of like average life. I mean, everybody has their different history. I grew up in a household where my mom and my dad separated when they were 3, but I was pretty content actually staying with my mom. Yeah, just had like kind of a very normal childhood, like not highly traumatizing, but also not raised in a spiritual environment or where the family had a lot of money. So very kind of like just working class and middle class, and that also carried through school and then later on through my education and to my job now, which I'm still doing and which I love very much as a precision machinist for a quite well-renowned international institute. So yeah, and then 10 years ago, I just started on the spiritual journey, which probably, I guess we can start with your first questions, like how I got there.
No, that's
And
exactly what was going to be my next question. What started you down the spiritual path?
yeah, yeah, exactly. Because like I had a very basic normal life, so friends, relationships. I was like always like easygoing with people and stuff. Never had like a hard time socially. And so at some point in time, of course, I had my first like kind of real girlfriend, and we moved together. We were together for like 3.5 years or something, until we broke up. Yeah, we moved together and then we broke up. And for me, a real kind of crisis started there. Actually, later on, a friend called it a midlife crisis, which I wouldn't have called it that, because it was like in my early 20s. But looking back, like, yeah, that was pretty much what you would call it in normal terms. But it was kind of a rude awakening in a sense that I noticed like how much happiness and effort like I put into the relationship and what I wanted to get out of it. And so in recognizing that, and the relationship failing, I started down on the spiritual development, well, personal development at first. So like the typical Tony Robbins stuff, just doing journaling, started reading books about personal development, started meditating, not out of spiritual reasons, just purely for like the concentration, the focus, and that side of the spectrum. Yeah, and yeah, later on, like it didn't actually take that long, so I kind of started meditating and upped my minutes from week to week. And at a certain point, I was like 20, 30, 40 minutes, sometimes once or twice a day. And suddenly I started having really kind of like weird experiences where I would just like close my eyes, just meditate, do a normal breath meditation or something. And I'd hear the sound of a bird outside my apartment, and something strange happened, because I was like, it's like not I'm hearing the sound of the bird, but the sound of the bird is just happening within me. So it was like kind of a very unitive experience. Like I couldn't distinct between Patrick was sitting here and listening to the bird outside. It was just like all one movement, all one happening. And I opened my eyes, was like, what is that? And I looked at my table and stuff, and I just immediately merged with everything. Or I didn't even merge, like as I opened my eyes, I recognized, oh, I'm the table. I'm the thing that sits on the table. And this only lasted for like 10, 20 seconds. And after that, I was like, oh, okay, what was that? Like, I think this shouldn't happen during meditation. I just like want peace and quiet. And that was the most peace and quiet I ever had. But it was very different from what I've ever known before in my life. And funny enough, like a couple of days later, a guy which I watched on YouTube, who brought out some meditation videos. His name is Leo Gura from Actualized. Many years ago, almost like no 10 years ago or something, had a video called which came out then, Enlightenment: The Most Shocking Truth You'll Ever Hear. I was like, and then I was like, okay, I'll listen to that. And what he described pretty much basically fit my experience before I even knew anything about enlightenment or awakening. So from there on, my my mind and my ego was pretty intrigued. It's like, okay, let's get that. Like shit on the personal development. Like now it's full on spiritual awakening. And yeah, and that pretty much started me down on reading Eckhart Tolle, Anna Watts, Adyashanti, David Data. I mean, pretty much anything I could get my hands on, YouTube wise and book wise, I would just like consume and meditate. Yeah, and that's like pretty much how it started. Like I could go more in depth and more details, but we might spread it out a bit more.
How did you go about beginning meditation? How did you find a technique that worked for you? Was there someone that
Yeah.
that taught it to you? You know, my I had no clue. I mean,
Yeah.
I had no clue about meditation, no clue about anything that you're speaking about until I had a guide. I had a very, very enlightened teacher that helped me with a certain specific technique. But it sounds like you just kind of did you create your own? Did you find something online or?
Yeah, actually, my whole path pretty much was like online. Yeah, I never had like a teacher that I would consider a real teacher. Although I did have different kind of teachers, and but like physically based, I would have a couple of guides. But I always considered them more or less as friends, and that was also kind of the blessing, because I actually never had this kind of like spiritual devotion to a teacher or to a guru, to just like put my faith blindly into someone, which is totally okay. It's actually a pretty valid path of waking up, but somehow this kind of never resonated with me. So I was like much more the research internet online guy. And that's how I found most of the books, most of the meditations. And I started, as I said, with Actualized and a couple other channels. Shinzen Young I watched, just basic mindfulness and basic breath watching meditation. That's how I kind of started. And then after a couple of months, I did also strong determination sitting, which is like a sitting of at least 1 hour where you just try to sit without even moving or scratching or something, just like very hardcore, very Zen. So it was more in the direction of Zen, the meditations, like very strict, very hardcore. Um, uh, Later on, after like a couple of months when I knew about enlightenment, like I was fully in. And but I also did like what actually was quite fruitful a couple of months down the road, was like the do nothing meditation, where you just actually, you have no ego agenda, you don't want to wake up, you basically do nothing but sit with whatever arises right here, right now. And to this day, that's still for me like one of the most effective techniques. That's also one thing I recommend to people. Yeah. And later on, I also tried a Vipassana, which is like the Goenka style Vipassana from the Buddha's teaching, where you just do the body scan, which is also something I like to do still sometimes, and which I also highly recommend to people. Yeah. So
Is
that's kind
there is there
of.
anything that you would suggest to people listening? Is there anything specific, or just kind of go off what they're feeling, what kind of resonates with them?
Yeah, good point. And I learned this in the last couple of months, because there's like now even enlightenment is like becoming somewhat of a more of a field that's scientifically studied. And this guy Jeffrey Martin, I found out he interviewed a lot of over 1,000 awakened people in the last 20 years. He actually said, and this is interesting because like reflecting back on my path, this kind of rings true, that people seem to have different body mind setups, as we already know, but that different techniques actually match up or synchronize with different body mind techniques. So there's things like self inquiry, where you kind of like precisely use the mind to probe your experience directly. For example, like you just ask yourself, who am I? But instead of waiting for an intellectual answer, you're just like waiting in the open space for the answer to arise. And then there's things like do nothing meditation, breath meditation, mantra meditation. So these all are kind of like different points or angles that can lead in the same direction of awakening. And some people do easier with inquiry, some people do easier with do nothing meditation, some really bloom in the Vipassana body scan technique. So I do think that it's very important for people to try out a couple of things. Like there's also the saying like don't dig too many shallow wells, otherwise you never get to the water, which is also kind of true. You can dabble a lot in a lot of things, but never reach any depth. But there is a certain sweet spot where you try different techniques out and see just what resonates and what actually brings you further in your direct experience. For example, like if we just meditate with Vipassana for 1 week, 1 to 2 hours straight every day, and then see if your current day-to-day experience changes. And it might be even that you have like a hard time with the technique, but that's actually what might be the technique that brings you further along. So it's really a game of trying out and experimenting. And if you're at a certain kind of level, you can also intuit certain things. Like if there's a certain level of awakeness, or you already done a lot of different practices, and you have like 3, 4, 5 different tools at your disposal, then you can just like intuitively feel into it and say, it's like, oh yeah, okay, today I feel more like the do nothing meditation, for example, and tomorrow or the next day, on that day, you might feel it's like, oh no, there's stuff going on in the body, so I might be better off like vigilantly scanning for contractions and doing the Vipassanalizing, for example. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's part of the, on a selfish note, that's part of the process I'm having the most difficulty with, because back when I first began, I was very confident in my path. I was very confident in my practice. I was very confident in what direction other people should go. And, truth has no sides.
Actually, quite nice. I didn't get a chance to comment on that, but a really nice name, actually. I love it.
Well, and it's like we talked about before we began. You're kind of floating in a sense, and the last thing the human mind and the humans on this planet, including myself, want to do is float. When I speak to people who, for the first time, and they're looking for guidance, or they're looking for some specific answer and they don't get it, they're kind of perplexed. They're confused. Some of them are kind of upset, because I have lost the ability to be confident in one way. I've lost the ability to be able to specifically say, this is it. And I watch a lot of, there's more people than ever who have an opinion, more people than ever who have a voice, who are teachers, who have life hacks, new techniques, new modalities, new ways, new words, new things, new processes. And everyone looks upon this time as easy access to information. It's the thing that's awakening people, and it's giving everyone clarity. I would be on the polar opposite end of that. I would think that there's so much information out there that I think it's never been more chaotic. I think it's never been more muddy in the water. I think our minds have never been more overloaded and overwhelmed with information. And I think a lot of people starting down this path they've got a million different options. So instead of picking one, they don't pick anything. They just kind of move along, because there's just far too many options, and there's too many people telling them that this is the way. And if I was a smart man and I wanted to make a lot more money and have I don't even know how to put that into words. I would pick something and tell people, do this, and this is what you'll get. And I've had the hardest. I've had the hardest time. I can't do it. I've tried for years to come up with some type of class, some type of specific way, some type of antidote, and there isn't one. There isn't one. But man, sure is a lot of intelligent people saying there is.
Well, yeah, you're totally right. And just from my perspective, I think like the less security, or the less certainty we have, is there's actually a maturity in that. Because like we're all often always very like sure on, like either we're super sure on an ego level, or we're super like unsure about something. But there is this like humbleness to not knowing, and to actually be open in every moment and say like, I trying to help you awaken or something if someone comes to you for guidance, but I have actually no idea. Like, I mean, I can't do it for you anyways. The best I can do is try as hard as I can from many different angles, as I've experienced myself, to just like lead you or point you in that direction. But you have to go yourself, and there's no guarantee at all that anything I ever say does anything for you. So I find it actually a sign of maturity, being uncertain. I mean, we can be certain with certain things, especially if we had like our own direct experiences of that, or say it's like, I'm certain that shifted me because of my experience that I had. But it's pretty hard to say like, I'm certain this is going to work for 99% of everyone else just because it worked for me. Like, that's sounds for me like a long shot. Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, and there's the last thing the mind or the ego wants at the human level is uncertainty.
Mm-hmm. True.
We're continuously looking for certainty in very uncertain ways, and especially with the shift going on this planet, the uncertainty is probably at a all-time high for humanity. And that's why there's more people than ever coming out saying this is the way.
Yeah,
This
and
is the way.
the interesting thing is like what I recognize more and more also working with people and myself is if we have certain kind of shifts, if there are, and because we're also talking about stages of awakening and layers and levels, location, whatever you want to call it, there's different names, but it's not just like either awake or non-awake. It's not just like this 50-50 thing. So there's different like kind of layers or degrees or colorations of awakening and flavors. And so often if we have a shift that feels more true than everything we ever experienced before, and then we think, oh, this is truth. Like, no, I'm this infinite nothingness, the spaciousness, nothing can touch me. I'm super transcended. There's nothing human anymore. And then suddenly something happens in life, or life pushes us in a certain direction. We have a new shift. It's like, oh, I'm not just nothing. I'm nothing, and simultaneously I'm human, and I'm having this experience. And things can be adverse and stuff, and life can still show me things that I didn't know were still like hidden, or things I cling to, and I find that like kind of refreshing, that we actually, where we're at always feels the most true experience that we're ever having until the next thing happens, and that feels more true then, especially with the awakening and shifting into deeper levels of consciousness that continuously feel more true than everything we experienced before, but until we have the next thing going on, and that feels more true. So
Yeah, and a lot of people heading down this path, I think they're full of shit. I think a lot of people are admitting to saying how they feel, and I'm not one of them. When people say it's beautiful and this is how it unfolds and everything, I'm not one of them. I'd like some certainty. I'd like for the next unfoldment to be it for me in this life. I'd like for some safety for this process for me has been quite difficult, and it is quite difficult for most people.
Same here. Yeah.
And we'll get into that more, but it's kind of like that the thing you were talking about, how the different levels of thinking we're an infinite one. We're all one. It's infinite. We're here for our true nature, as Adyashanti says, right? We're here to wake up to our true nature. There's so many things, but at the end of the day, the inability to pick one way for me has become everything's a construct. Everything. And spirituality has become a new religion. Anyone who denies that is full of shit. It has become a new religion. There's white loose clothing and mala beads to wear, and taking a very aggressive personality and being very calm when you're really not that type of person. It's just become a new religion, whether it's psychedelics or meditation or anything. But
Oh
it's all
yeah,
part
you
of
can basically use anything just to create another platform to get identified from, and do your thing from it.
Yep.
And that's what I love about you, and I think that's why we resonate, because we're pretty both non-bullshit and radical honesty with the process. And that was also one of the tools that actually deepened me more into my humanity after I had like some transcendent shifts. Was after I had a breakup with my current wife, is I tried radical honesty, which is like very down to earth, very human, nitty gritty. You just like unfilteredly present to other people what's going on with you at the moment, especially if you're someone who's spiritually identified and think they should always feel peace and love and harmony and stuff. That can really like poke a hole in into your paradigm. Like it's like, yeah, okay, now I'm sitting in front of 10 people and I have to admit, like, one of my worst fantasies is like having sex in this kind of way, or because in Radical Honesty you share like about your money, like you pretty much like open in a very safe and uh, um, environment where everybody's on the same page, but you basically open up to all your human inadequacies and stuff. And that's one of the deepest form of shadow works. And I see that as well. That's why I think we have like nowadays, and you get this more and more often, teacher who are awake on the level and who teach awakening might even have like 1 million followers on YouTube or something. But then you hear that, yeah, they've done not so nice things with their devotees, or that they misuse their power or sex or drugs or something, that they still have these shadows, and that there's still something within their system which makes them act in a very unloving, unconscious way, even though they might have a very conscious, very loving recognition going on a moment to moment basis. And I do think one fault is maybe a little bit hard, but I think through the dynamic of the and I think it can be healthy, the teacher guru dynamic, the teacher student dynamic, or guru devotee dynamic. But since people put teachers on a pedestal and always think, oh, he's so awakened, he couldn't act that way, and the teacher thinks like, oh yeah, I'm so awakened because all these people think I'm so awakened, that kind of like reinforces a pattern where growth stagnates, and sometimes these deeper shadows can't even come to the surface, because students probably don't go to their teacher and say like, oh, I saw this was quite the enlightened behavior, and everybody else felt that as well, and we wanted to bring that to you as a critique point for you to look at that or something. Like I don't know, maybe this kind of stuff happens, but I've never seen it happen in any these kind of situations. And so yeah, I don't know where I'm going with this, but yeah, I do think that there's a lot of things that even teachers, even people, guides, coaches, whatever you want to call them, that they still have a lot of their own work to do, and things to unravel. And as we talked about Adyashanti before we started, and I think there's a really nice layer of depth that these people could add to actually to the awakening, that's the shifting that's going on the planet, is just sharing not just their transcendent realizations, but also the coming back down to the humanity, and integrating that realization, and then sharing also from that viewpoint. And then it becomes more holistic. It's not just this, I'm transcending humanness and that's it. I'm transcending humanness, but I'm also integrating humanness. I'm fully human and fully transcendent, which is like one, and not just like get rid of the humanness and just like up top into the heavenly realms and stuff. Yeah.
Well, and that's the one thing probably in the past year that's really become clear is I see so many people talking about escaping the matrix,
Mm-hmm.
escaping humanness, leaving their humanness behind. Psychedelics have become incredible, right? All the different modalities, even the meditation that I did with the mantra was transcending, sitting down and meditating for 3-4 hours that would flow by like it was a few seconds. Continuously trying to get rid of the stuff I didn't like about myself. But then you start, when you go down this path, you usually go down a very narrow path because it starts working for you. So you're not looking at everything else. Just like me, I had meditation, and my teacher kept me from psychedelics. He kept me from all of the bullshit that creates more noise. Legitimately, it creates more noise. The crystals, the incense, the frequencies, the psychedelic, the healings, the escaping the matrix, the new age stuff, all of that stuff that some people are very attracted to. One of the things that I've heard a lot of in the last year, I've listened to, I've had a fascination with near-death experiences. I listened to a few of them, And I started to realize they were all speaking about the same thing. They would experience the same thing. They would speak about the love, the peace, and the bliss. They would feel like they were a home. They would feel a love they can't describe. They would see a light they can't even, it's brighter than the sun. Like everyone was describing the
Hmm.
same thing. So it seems like that other side that apparently hundreds of millions of people have experienced in every religion, including atheists, everything talks about them. Hundreds of millions of people. Where we think we want to go as a human, we were on the other side.
Hmm.
We were in a different dimension. We were at home. We were in our soul. We were feeling incredible amounts of peace and bliss. Uh, People always talk about being able to manifest anything you want. And apparently, we got so fucking bored that we decided to come and be a human. No one
Yeah, I
talks
mean,
about
makes
no
sense.
no 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 one talks about that.
Yeah, yeah.
So why would we were so bored. We were a 70-year-old man who's retired and played so many rounds of golf with his buddies, he got sick of golf and wanted something else. We had everything we wanted as we, roll along the spiritual path. We're looking for peace, bliss, and love. We're looking for enlightenment. We're looking to get past our humanness. We're looking to escape the matrix. It's all bullshit in a sense.
Hmm.
And we're speaking from personal experience because we had that and we got bored and we came here. And not only did 8 billion people come here, but there's a line around the galaxy of other souls who think we won the lottery and they want our spot because
Hmm.
they're so bored. They want to feel the ups and downs. They want to feel different emotions, different experiences because they can't get that in a non-physical form.
Yeah.
So even the movie The Matrix, which I absolutely love, even the people in that, the red or the blue pill, even when he escaped the Matrix, he was still with other humans fighting a war against machines.
Hmm.
I, the irony of everything we think we're doing, because at the human level, we're creating from a very limited perspective. Um, and we think we know what we're doing. We think we know what enlightenment is. We think we know what awakening is. We think we know what being one, all one is. But it's all, everything that you and I are discussing are constructs, everything we're talking about. So the truth has no sides. It just encompasses everything on this planet because we came here to
Hmm.
experience.
Yeah.
That's it. We didn't come here in a sense to learn. I know we'll learn from experience, but we talk about our soul evolving or reaching enlightenment or reaching the mountaintop, as I spoke about so many times. But again, it seems to me that we already had all that, and we came here to be human, to experience all of it. Adi Shanti, one of our you and I's favorite teachers, always talks about waking up to your true nature.
Hmm.
Well, we already knew what our true nature was, but we came here to be human. I feel like we're missing something by saying that we want to escape the matrix. Well, you can't escape the
Yeah,
matrix.
yeah. I
You cannot
mean,
escape the matrix. Being you came here to be human. There's
exactly.
nothing to escape.
If you willingly decided to have that experience, it's about like fully living that and integrating that, and not transcending that. And yeah, the transcendence point, like it's a very good point, and I do think that we also need to transcend in order to integrate. Like that's because it's like the eye that can't see itself. So if you're like a quote unquote like normal identified person, there is this, that's why we call it ignorance is bliss. Like you didn't have like the notion that there's something deeper to this, or something that's living through you, or life is like guiding you in a way. And the more and more you wake up, the more you see that. But simultaneously you also need to kind of like transcend the humanist to fully integrate the humanist again. At least that's like my experience, and from what I people heard, because we're so identified that we can't see like the truth of the universe, or the absolute, or whatever you want to call it, the enlightenment side, because we're so narrowly identified that we first have to shed like the narrow identification, and then become awareness or God or whatever you want to call it. And then from that viewpoint, like Adyashanti talks about like the up and out. That's like the transcendence. Like it's like, oh yeah, I'm past the humanness. I'm only infinite consciousness. But then that's only the half of the picture. The other half is like, oh yeah, but I decided to incarnate here as a human, and that's like the down and in movement, where you then go through the not just the like the recognition and the insight, but the embodiment, and like really occupying the human body mind as a vehicle for expression of your non-dual realization, and not just like non-dually transcending and then going off into a cave and just like doing that with life. So yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of misconceptions on this path. Um, let's jump into the thing that you and I cross paths for.
Yeah.
Let's jump into what I would assume most people or a lot of people listening would think is magical or
Mm-hmm.
not possible, not real. Um, there's been quite a few people that I've sent to you who always thought when I was sending them to you for energy healings or healings that you lived in Salt Lake in Utah with me because they're used to normal doctors, normal healings. It has to be physical. It has to be in the same room. And I say, no, he's in Germany. He's going to work with you via Zoom. And some people were okay with it. Quite a few people didn't understand it. And then there were a few people that pushed back. And 100% of the people would do it because they trusted me. And some of them would do it just to, in a sense, prove me wrong that it didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but just like future episodes of other things like the Akashic records and other things that people don't know exist, 100% of the time they would come back just amazed, right? They would be on, I'm in Salt Lake, you're in Germany, and you would do your healings, your Shakti pot, as they call it, transmission, and they would be able to feel the energy going through their body or coming through the top of their head through the crown. So, what is it that you have done in the past? What would you call it? Is it called energy healing? Is it called Shakti pot? Is it called the transmission? Tell us more about that because I think a lot of people would be very interested in that.
Yeah, cool. Maybe one little short point to how I got there, because you mentioned it's like you just meditated and left out the psychedelics and all the new age stuff. Like my way was totally around. Like I tried everything. Like, I did all the different psychedelics out there, probably a lot of them at least, um, and different kind of meditation techniques. I also worked with crystals and stuff, and I used to be like very cold and unsensitive before starting the path on awakening, so very like disconnected from my emotions and everything. And through meditation, like I became much more acutely aware of my body and what serves it, what not. And so that also shifted like my diet very intuitively. And at a certain point, I took psychedelics with a friend for more or less recreational uses, but I did meditate at the time. So I was like kind of interested and open to whatever would unfold, and whatever unfolded put me down on a path where I actually take psychedelics like about like once a month or something, but by myself, like not facilitated by anyone else, not with buddies at a club or something to just rave off. I'd basically take a whole Saturday or something just by myself, clean my house, start meditating for an hour or doing qigong or yoga for 1 to 2 hours, and then started to taking my own homegrown mushrooms, which I did. And from that point on, my spiritual path unfolded very differently. As I said, I was like more the Zen-like before, just like meditate, and I had a couple of awakening experiences, but I actually didn't feel energy. So energy was still something that was very like woo to me, and where it's like, I don't know what they're talking about. And so once I did these sessions, I could sense actually that I have these like energy centers. And that was before I even knew about chakras. I would like kind of like take shrooms, feel something in my body, like a density, or it's like, oh, there's like this heavy pressure. And I just, for example, like put my hands on there, on my heart or on my belly, and then I would like suddenly feel that energy would like come out from my hands into my body. Something popped, and then I just like had a blast, like I just had a laughing flash for like 2 minutes straight or something, because something released from my system. And so from that point on, I was like, okay, there is something to energy. That's what people are talking about, and when they're talking about this kind of stuff. And so then the next couple of years, I learned Reiki and like kind of like just, I would call them lower modalities of healing, like Reiki pretty much anybody can do. And then there's like nowadays there's stuff like vortex healing, or later on then you get to Shaktipat, which is awakening the Kundalini energy, which is still something else than rasa or divine light transmission or pure consciousness transmissions, which are really directly pointed at awakening. So deconstructing energetically the ego structure. And so as I got more energetically aware, I was interested like in Shaktipat, and I tried like a mala that's loaded with Shaktipat by Jan Essmann in a certain kind of meditation, and that's kind of what brought me more into the consciousness transmissions with energy. But that still wasn't the thing. Like the Shaktipat did a lot for me, but it didn't shift. And a couple of months later, I found something called Rasa, which you and I know from Ramaji. And I did my first session, and I afterwards, like I was like really amazed, because it felt like I was just sitting there. This energy would come, as he said, like from the crown, from the top of the head, and descend into the body, and would just like do its thing. And later on, after the session, we just like said goodbye, and I took a walk, and there was like 50 minutes straight without any thought. Like, well, I did have thoughts, but there was just only the thought like, oh, I didn't have a thought for a minute, and then it dissipated again or something. So I really knew that this is something else. This is something else than the Shaktipat. This is something else than the Reiki or other energy healing modalities. And that's where I took it from there on. And then I went the route with the Rasa, and did that for like 1.5 years, and then asked Ramaji if I could also do this for other people, because it felt like a blessing. It opened things up for me. It shifted me into the earlier locations of awakening, and I just saw so much benefit, and that I wanted to do it myself. And that's kind of what I did. And that's also how we met. I was just like basically finished the training, and did my website, and I didn't do a lot of, because I wasn't into, I was never the guy to kind of like do ads or something about myself and promote myself. That was never kind of really my thing. But somehow then a mutual friend that we know kind of like came and said like, oh, can we have a session together? And I had my session with her, and she had such a good experience that she wrote you, and then we connected, and that's how the whole thing started. And I really felt that this transmission, which I would argue actually almost anybody can do it, especially if they have a certain level of awakening or a certain level of integration, but maybe also an energetic sensitivity or an inclination, then it's much easier. But yeah, and that's kind of like how I started working with the people that you sent me.
So we'll go. I don't know
Sorry
if
if
we
I
want to.
did
No,
make
no,
a
no,
very long bow or something, but
no.
yeah.
I don't. I'm trying to figure out if we want to go to levels of consciousness or the energy. What is it that you're
Mhm.
doing? Right? What is that energy? Why are you able to bring that energy to me halfway across the world over a screen like this? How does the person that's just barely learning about this, who's saying this is bullshit, what's a very simple way to help them understand it?
Mm. Yeah. So basically, my most radically honest answer is like, I have no idea how it works
Hmm.
and why it works. I just know from my own experience that it does, and from the people that I work with, and also people, not that I just work with, but that I saw other people working with, that they had shifts as well. And so there's like different theories we can use. One would be, for example, like which is also like a non-dual concept, is that there's or even a direct experience, if you go there, there's no space and no time, meaning everything we perceive are limitations, but the truth is unlimited, meaning there's infinite possibilities. There is this like ground of nothingness from which everything that's not nothing can arise. That's like the two sides of the same coin, the nothingness, which is the basis for the everythingness, so to say. And with a transmission, what basically happens is someone who's at that recognition or at that level of consciousness, and things we can go later into, kind of has a certain level of embodiment, or at least they have some connection to that energy, to that realization. And what they can do, and especially in a one-on-one meeting, is they transmit that, like just by actually, if you would just sit with a person, that's why also a lot of people seek out spiritual teachers, is to be in proximity and like quote unquote get the energy to awaken. And so basically, by someone else having this realization and intending for it to shine upon you. So basically what I do is, like, if we sit in front each other and we would like to do a session and I would start the transmission, is that I'm just calling in for this realization of truth. Let's just call it truth for now, or enlightenment, is that I fully intend and wish this upon you, and I give like my whole intention, my whole being, just in the process of actually serving you as a human being to realize that for yourself. That's actually basically what the transmission is broken down. How it is that it works over time and space, as we said, time and space is our construct. If you go deeper down into your direct experience, you will see that you have no direct experience of time and space, and that's how energy can be transmitted. Or if you even want to go into the physics, and I'm not like a physicist or something, but there's like quantum entanglement. It's like if one element meets another element and they part into the other end of the universe. If one something happens to one, the other one recognizes. Or you have that with single egg twins or something. I don't know how they're called in English, but they get this intuition. If something happens to their other twin, they immediately have the recognition and know this, and even if they're halfway around the world. And so this energy is also transmitted through truth and not through time and space. Well, time and space is used, but yeah, that's pretty much like right now. I probably could give you a better answer, but it's not coming right now. So that's
Well,
the best.
we'll keep it simple. Like a lot of people have seen the movie Arrivals with Amy Adams, where those
Mm-hmm.
aliens come to Earth, and she figures out a way to communicate with them. And one of her first questions is, "Where are you from?" And I don't remember where they said they were from, but she said that's 2 million light years away.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a very significant distance. And she said, "How did you get here? Are you artificial intelligence?" And all the alien said was, "As soon as you let go of your construct of time and space, you can be anywhere."
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
That's
And that seems like a very simple explanation for you and I, since we have read all the books and we understand a lot of this stuff. But it's kind of like the ocean. The drop of the ocean is attached to the other drop next to it, and the next drop, and it's all connected. And that's the way consciousness is, quantum entanglement, however you want to talk about it, spiritually or scientifically. And there are just people who have the ability to tap into that. No different than someone like a basketball player who's really good at basketball and someone else who's incredibly unathletic.
exactly.
Some people like you can tap into that energy and bring it to another human being. Kind of like the remote viewers that the government have used.
Oh yeah,
That has been proven time and time again, and all those people have come out. and they can sit here in a bedroom and tell you what's on a desk in Russia, right? It's just consciousness. It's kind of
Yeah.
like the near-death experiences. When the doctor says and people say that consciousness is created by the brain, but that person was in a coma and they were absolutely brain dead to every piece of machinery that was attached to them, yet that person was above their body and could tell them everything the doctor did, said, and everyone around them and what happened. Right? You're starting to understand more and more people that the brain is just a tune, like a tuner, like a radio tuner. And
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
not creating
exactly.
consciousness, it's just interpreting it. So the consciousness being all one, as the hippies would say,
Mm,
um, that's how remote viewers do it. That's how you're able to bring energy, as we think,
exactly.
10,000 miles across.
Yeah,
That's how other entities or other beings are able to go vast distances in space. But it's all connected. And
yeah,
I don't have that ability. Most people don't have that ability. So just because they can't experience it directly, just because they don't have that ability, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Just because I can't dunk a
exactly.
basketball doesn't mean LeBron can't dunk a basketball.
True. Yeah. Yeah, you find very nice words there for that actually. Because if we like go down to it and we say we're all consciousness having a human experience, then actually consciousness is also what does the work of the transmission and not the human. That's also one aspect I wanted to make very clear, that for example, like often with Reiki or things like this, is that you as a human body mind system, you open up to the universe and then channel the energy through the body into the other body mind system. And with the transmission, I just call it that transmission. I don't have any, there's like divine light transmission, sat force, and these are all different flavors, or unity consciousness transmissions. Like people call it different names,
Mm-hmm.
who also have this ability. But I kind of learned it on a very, like how you would basically learn the piano. And I do think that other people who are energy sensitive, or even people who are not energy sensitive, can, if they really intuitively feel called to it, that they can learn it as well, because it's within everyone's capacity. Same as like I probably could learn how to dunk a basketball, but I probably would never be as good as some profi sport
Well,
players.
and I think that's a big misconception too on this path. And everyone says like everyone has the ability to do that. No, they don't. No,
Yeah,
I am a 5'2". I'm not, but if you look at a 5'2" white guy, he's not going to dunk a basketball. And
yeah,
everyone can say that, with spiritually, or there's so many uh, grand things that people are here on the spiritual path that gives them false hope in a sense that this
yeah,
isn't everybody. Yes, it is, because we're all coming from the same source, but we've came down to a very human experience, a very divided experience, an experience that our soul chose, and your soul may have chose to be, in a sense, very low consciousness, or very unathletic, and you're never going to dunk a basketball.
mhm,
There are a significant, the majority, 99% of the people will never be able to do the healing transmission that you speak of. Most
yeah.
people won't be called to it. Most people won't believe it. Most people think it's bullshit.
True. Yeah, I think
Um,
that's the factor which, like, kind of probably the biggest factor,
yeah,
which like kind of just sorts out automatically most people who aren't like drawn there.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
when it comes to that healing, how is it? What is it doing to the individual that
Mhm.
is working with you, and what is the greatest benefit of it?
Yeah. So the transmission actually basically has one goal. It's not like healing modalities, like they often like balance out your system, or like or heal the chakras or something. The what I just call the transmission is it's actually very laser focused towards the um, energetic disensemblement of the ego. So basically, if we imagine ourselves like we're this human being, and we often think like I'm the thinker, I'm the seer, I'm the hero. So we often like have this very contracted sense, is that like I'm in here, or people often say it's like, yeah, this is me. So we kind of like point to these two locations in the body and say like, this is me, or this is where I reside, this is where I look out the eyes, this is where I hear out the ears and stuff, and this is where I think the me thoughts. And what the transmission actually does energetically, and I could use different kind of concepts if you want to go the chakra route. You could say it opens up the crown chakra and lets divine energy, which we could just like call consciousness or truth. It opens the gateways for that, or the floodways. So our true nature, it's everybody's true nature. Everyone could recognize it right here, right now, but we're so identified with our stream of consciousness that we constantly kind of like reify the sense of self. It's like, yeah, this is me, I'm here, and I have an itch there, and this is my life and the story. And so we're basically 24/7 engaged with the sense of self. And what the transmission does is energetically it dismantles the sense of self. That's often it feels for people, as I mentioned, is that they're like in their head. Sometimes some people even say it's like, oh yeah, there's like this cloud of thoughts. And I even heard people, and that was like one experience that I had myself, it's just like this density through the transmission kind of like opens up, and something deeper can like come in. Like we could call it clarity, spaciousness, consciousness. It just like something opens and it just pours down into the body and relaxes the body, and it relaxes all the all the tensions, all the grips we hold, and all these kind of like tension and grips are like kind of either subtle or very gross identifications often throughout our mind, throughout our body mind system. And this energetically kind of just like penetrates a lot of these blockages. Or if you, another analogy would be if the ego is a house of cards, with a transmission, instead of like, if you can meditate for 20-30 years and still not awaken. So what often happens is we have this house of cards, which is the ego, and then we, as you say, we want to get better. So we put one card aside and put another card there, or we might take one card out, but then leave it there, but there's still this whole construct. And the transmission is actually pretty good at like drilling into the base of the construct, and then just like by crumbling the lowest few identifications, everything else on top just comes crumbling and falling down. That's what people often actually experience, and that's what happens quite regularly to people who go this route with transmissions. Not just with me, but there's like, I know a couple of, at least a handful other transmission givers, who have clients and stuff, and who have regularly people come to them and awaken through the transmission. But important to say, it's also a two-way street, meaning that the person who comes to the transmission also has to be a certain level of maturity, or that maybe sounds a little bit harsh. They don't have to be at a certain level. Well, it definitely helps to be at a certain level of maturity, but they at least have to have the openness that it can happen for them. Like, for example, like if I just stubbornly would give I don't know, some dictator or something somewhere in some country, the transmission like 1 hour a day, and I would just commit to that, the likelihood of him waking up would probably be still pretty much close to zero, because he doesn't even have like the openness to even like receive that, or to even be aware that this possibility is even possible for him. And so if people come to the transmission, often intuitively or by being pushed from somebody outside, which also is a kind of intuition. It just seems more dual because it doesn't come from this body mind, but some other body mind. And they tend to wake up through that often quite fast.
Well, that's a perfect transition to the levels of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is probably the largest missing piece of any discussion that has to do with spirituality.
Yeah.
Of any modality, of spiritual or non-spiritual, anything to do before the spiritual path. Everyone thinks that people are only spiritual when they start meditating. No, everything that we do is spiritual. And
Yeah.
this book of 1,000 talks about the different levels, and he just breaks it down from 0 to 100, 100 to 200, and so on up to 1,000. And he says the vast majority of this planet, and the vast majority, are around 200. I think it's like 275 out of 1,000.
Mm-hmm.
So that's significantly low. That does not mean intelligence. That's where a lot of people get upset.
Oh yeah,
Thinking
that's a big misconception.
they think that their consciousness level is the same as intelligence. No, there are incredibly intelligent people who have very, very low consciousness. And the best way I can describe that is the same way I describe it in the book, and anyone I'm working with is like you're driving down the freeway and you've got an incredible amount of grease, Crisco, on your windshield. The vast majority of the world is driving down the highway of consciousness, and everyone's got Crisco on their windshield. So as you're driving, if everyone around you has the same, you kind of just bump into each other, but everyone's going down the same direction. But you're guessing what's on the other side. You
Mm-hmm.
cannot see. At the lower levels of consciousness, you cannot see. And as consciousness is raised, it's kind of like taking the windshield wipers or a towel or some type of whatever you want to call it, and you're starting to wipe away the grease. You're starting to see a little bit more clearly. Because of the amount of grease on the windshield for so many people, that's why a Catholic and an atheist disagree. That's why a Republican and a Democrat disagree. That's why a Muslim and a Hindu disagree. People are simply guessing what's on the other side and how they grew up, who they grew up around, how they were conditioned, who their parents were, what they saw on TV, what interested them, who helped them, who taught them. That's who they're going to be. That's what their beliefs are going to be, most likely, right? You take a lot of people here in Utah, the vast majority of people are Mormon. You take a lot of people down in Texas or the Bible Belt, the vast majority of people are Baptist. So when he's talking about being at a level of maturity, he's not meaning a level of maturity. He's meaning more of a level of consciousness, because the vast majority of the world are not even thinking about meditation. Perfectly fine. It's kind of like saying a 5-year-old and a 15-year-old. The 15-year-old is not better than the 5-year-old. They're just at different stages of life.
Yeah.
The 5-year-old is not worse than the 15-year-old. Again, they're just at different stages. So a second grader and a 10th grader, no different. This is the same with levels of consciousness. This is the same with being able to see what is in front of you. And that is never spoken about. It's never spoken about on the news. It's very rarely spoken about in any, even conversation like this on the spiritual.
Yeah.
I'm blown away that that's not more of a topic, because how more people, two guys with a 170 IQ, same Harvard graduate, everything about them is the same. And one is an atheist and one is a Catholic. Why? Built off of their past, built off of their conditioning, that's it. If both of them were able to clear the Crisco from their windshield, they would see what was on the other side.
Yeah.
And everything would change about that. They would see that the Catholic and the atheist are having the same argument. They would see the Republican and the Democrat are having the same argument. They would see that all of these debates, all of these arguments, all of these different perceptions are basically all the same once you wipe away the Crisco, once you wipe away and you start seeing clearly. So when you talk about the energy coming through the crown and giving clarity, that's where this energy and your abilities and what you do are so crucial, because you have the ability, not you, I know you were going to tell me that it's not you, but in this sense, Patrick is starting to help the individual on the other end wipe away Crisco. You're starting to allow them to see a little bit more. And those different levels of consciousness, it's a great book. It's called 1000. It'll just show you. And it makes perfect sense. A lot of people are at 300, a lot of people are at 400. In the 500s, people start to meditate. They start to ask about stuff like this. 600s is more of the awakening. 700 just raises up to 1,000. But the different levels are not better than the lower levels. It is just simple someone 5 years old and someone 15.
Yeah.
And as
And that's so
adults,
important. Yeah, thanks for
yeah,
pointing that out. But I do think, because I do think I do love maps, and I do think that they're very valuable and they should be used more often. But as you said, like, there needs to be a disclaimer. Is like, just because someone is LOC 700, he's not better than someone who's LOC 200, because that's also just separation. That's just the ego putting itself on a pedestal, or somebody else. Oh, this teacher is at 1,000 and I'm only 600, or whatever. So it creates this discrepancy and this separation. So if we can use the maps, the levels of consciousness, without doing that, or at first, like, it's almost inevitable to not do that once you kind of found out about these informations, like, as you said, as like, yeah, where am I? Where can I go to? That's normal. That's actually something that we can just, like, accept and say, okay, yeah, that's just how the mind is. The ego wants to go from A to Z in 5 minutes, and not in 10 years or something. So just, like, acknowledging that and saying, okay, there is this map. There is people who are at like 200, and then there is people at 1,000. But just knowing that there's actually no inherent difference, which is like then non-duality or non-separateness. It's just saying, like, the 5-year-old isn't worse than the 15-year-old. It's just the difference in evolution or time, or one has gone through processes that the other hasn't yet. And that kind of, like, it levels out everything. It doesn't give so much basis to argue or to make big distinction or discrepancies. Yeah, that's, I find, very good to point out.
what is um, what is the
Should we
what is
go?
go ahead.
Yeah, should we go into maybe a little bit more the LOCs and what they mean? So basically, because I said before, people need a certain maturity, or a certain readiness to actually wake up, and that often happens around, because you said that at 500 spirituality starts, but and at the 560 level, that's where people really are getting interested in non-duality. So 500s could also be that you're into esoteric stuff, you're reading about crystals, and all that stuff is fine, like, nothing against that. You're reading about crystals and maybe even doing energy work, but you're not quite into enlightenment or non-duality yet. With the 560, according to his book, is where the spiritual seeking really starts to become conscious, and you're just like, oh, there is this thing called enlightenment, and I'm gonna make my way there. And that's a crucial point for a lot of people. So most people that you sent me were from the 550s to the 570s somewhere. And when I got to the rasa thing, I was also actually at the 570s, which is like the pinnacle of spiritual seeking. That's where you're the most on fire, and you just, like, you're basically bargaining with God. It's like, okay, if I do this meditation, will I become enlightened? That's, like, kind of a point where a lot of people are at that point, and come to this kind of transmission. And sooner or later, often it does do something for them, and they flip.
Well, and to what Patrick's saying when he was talking about being able to, people think about this transmission and they think, well, why don't we just do this to bad people? Why don't we do this to more people on the
Mhm.
lower end of consciousness? Their windshields are so caked with Crisco. You take that first swipe on the windshield, it's just going to be
Yeah,
more greasy.
yeah,
It's just going to spread.
exactly.
It's just going to spread the grease. There's so much grease on the lower levels of consciousness on this planet that no matter what, you can just say, "Hey, I know you're Republican, but Democrats are right," and they're going to lose their mind, and vice versa. Or a Catholic and an
Yeah.
atheist, they're not going to be able to see it because as we evolve, just kind of like as natural as a 5-year-old turning six, the 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 thing that allowed us to be born into a physical form, the universe, consciousness, whatever you want to call it, naturally starts to wipe that grease off.
Mhm.
So Patrick could spend the rest of his life trying to do this transmission for a certain dictator. It's just not really going to do much.
Yeah.
So as time goes on, the natural evolution of the soul, anyone in the 300s to 400s will not be going to Patrick. And I'm sure it's rare, if ever, anyone below 500 or 550 has ever skipped across your path or you've ever done a transmission for, because they're
Yeah,
not going to
funny
be ready
enough, yeah,
for it and
I
they don't care.
actually did do it with my dad. which he was definitely not in the 500s. But since he would like kind of listened and saw my path unfolding and is very open and interested in what I do, it actually did do stuff for him. But it's probably because of our close relationship and that he had a certain level of openness to what I do. And he would also actually describe what people in the 500s or something would describe from the transmission, from what he could sense and feel. Or for him, for example, it was like that stuff was being pulled out of his body. Like he would just see flashes of like violent images or something, but they weren't like, it's not that he sat there and was like ingrained into it and traumatized, but actually he could sense stuff leaving his body and being alleviated by contractions, by pressure, by certain kind of memories or energies and stuff. So that was interesting, but I think it just worked because of our mutual relationship. And interestingly enough, I have a lot of people who are in the realm of spiritual seeking who know about enlightenment, who want to become enlightened. But as I even told them what I do, they never asked to get a transmission. That's something I found really interesting, because that was like, in the beginning where I learned this, I was like, I want to give everybody a transmission, especially all of my friends who were like gonna awaken from that. So there was still sort of identification and agenda with that. But I never like was the pushy guy, so I never like mentioned anything. I might have asked like one or two, and they would say okay, but never did anyone except like one of my friends, and I'm working with her now. She's actually the first person I ever actually taught this kind of transmission thing. And it was just very intuitively, because she was the only one who ever came to me and said like, hey, I know you're doing this kind of stuff. Can you just like do it with me for me? It's like, yeah, of course. If you're asking, then I do it. And a lot of other people just like, they never thought about it or never intrigued them enough to really go that route, which I found quite interesting, because they were, I would perceive them as somebody, if they did it for a couple of times, they probably would have some realization or some shifts. But there is, it's I'm not meaning this in a bad way, but there is like this lack of maturity, or maybe even the lack of them thinking it's really possible for them, and that this might be too woo and just get some transmission from some friend and wake up or something.
Well,
Yeah.
and this just comes full circle to what we talked about halfway through. Everything's just an experience. We are the only thing that thinks in a linear way. We're the only thing that thinks we have to, because a 22-year-old turns 23 and 20, we born, we die, we get older,
Yeah.
we go through school, first grade, second grade, third grade. It's 12 o'clock, then it's 1 o'clock, and we're continuously thinking in this in this evolution. It's just an experience. There's an experience at 200, there's an experience at 500, there's an experience at 700. All of these experiences are just different. We are the only ones that put a premise on it. Being higher or lower, being more mature, being more clear, everything. But that's what humans need. That's the way the mind is, very divided, simple perception, very limited perception mind of being human and an ego. That's what we need. Or I wouldn't have gone down this path if I didn't know I could improve, or I could go from 600 to 700 or 800. Like, that's how we're built. So that's how
Oh yeah,
everything
yeah, yeah.
around us is built. But it comes
On
back
that
to,
realm, it's totally healthy to
yeah,
function like that. Yeah, and
it's
that
just an
that's how it
experience.
is. Yeah.
It's just an experience. We are thinking we're going to create heaven on earth and peace and bliss and everything else. All I can say is we had that, and we came here to be human, to experience different things.
Yeah.
And part of it is peace and bliss, but everyone thinking that enlightenment's going to bring this permanent state of peace and bliss, everything, there's nothing permanent. It comes and it goes.
Yeah, especially from what I heard, and I'm probably not fully there myself, but I do actually have a lot of people that I know who went quite far, and they say at a certain point, like even in deeper realizations and stuff, like a lot of the bliss goes away, or it's not what you think it is. Like people, and even these people talk about their adversity and their growing edge and stuff, and that what's we talked about this before. That's why I find it so nice and humbling that nowadays, like people like Adyashanti open up about their PTSD, or some. That's what I found very refreshing about Rupert Spira. Even in a YouTube video, he said, um, even after a couple of years of this realization and really deepening into it, he still kind of sometimes had an argument with his son or something, where a lot of people like project onto awakened folks or enlightened people. It's like, oh, they're the perfect gurus. They never have a fault. They always experience bliss. It's like, no, like even the more awake you are, the more acutely aware you even get. If you're suffering in your life at some point in area, because your awareness, like quote unquote, like widens, and if there's just a little dissonance, you notice much more than before when you lived in ignorance. Because if you lived in ignorance and you're just like, oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to watch a Netflix if I have a bad feeling, nothing against that. But just like these typical like mechanisms that we use to not feel ourselves or to not have particular experiences. And that we can, the more we awaken, the less we can do that actually. The more you're going to sit, and then this happens to me and still sometimes less, as like I sit in front of Netflix and it's like, holy fuck, there's nothing to watch. Like there's literally billions of years you could probably entertain yourself with watching one thing after another. And you're just sitting there, it's like, yeah, it's all empty. It's just like I'm sitting there and I'm recognizing, there's something in my experience that doesn't want to be felt or something, and I'm trying to divert my attention from that. And that's even in deeper realizations that people talk about this, and that's why I find it so humbling, but also so in a sense so freeing. Yeah, that especially new spiritual newcomers or people who have been on the road for quite some time, that there's a lot of misconception being dispelled, because I think most of the things that keep us from awakening are also the misconceptions that we have about awakening. That's often one of the biggest traps, actually. Yeah.
Yes, I completely agree. I've used the word boring a lot
Mm-hmm.
because you awaken to why you did what you did, why you did
Yeah.
drugs, why you did psychedelics, why you drank, why you watched Netflix, why you watched sports, why you had certain hobbies. Um, it was all a distraction, and I would personally like some new distractions. So I hope, yeah, I would like some new distractions. I find myself looking for a new show to watch, and there are some good shows that will keep my
Yeah,
attention.
sometimes you come across things that just pull in your consciousness, and it's like, okay, fine, I can watch this. But it tends to happen less and less.
Yeah, yeah, and they are legitimate distractions. It's not. I don't think I could read another spiritual book or listen to another spiritual talk or listen to go on Gaia. Um, there's some interesting stuff that we'll get into in other podcasts with channeling and everything else. But yeah, boring is a word I've used
Yeah.
quite a bit in the last few years. Is just you just kind of get bored.
Well, yeah, and in a sense, like the more spiritually aware you become, even the more bored you become with spirituality, because you
Yeah.
see it's just the next little game that you're playing, actually.
Yep. You were just, yeah. It's the heads to the tails of the coin. You left Catholicism thinking you're not religious. You're spiritual. Shut the
Yeah.
fuck up. Stop. Spirituality is just spiritualism. It's just
Yeah.
another
Yeah,
religion.
just like materialism, just like the next thing. Although I do think that there is like quote unquote a sense of progression. And what I like actually from one guy, I think who's pretty deep, Frank Yang, he actually uses well, he also has it from someone else, but the analogy that you're using a thorn to get out a thorn that is stuck in your palm or stuck in your body somewhere, you use another thorn to get rid of the thorn that's poking you. And so basically, we trade models, like we trade materialism for spirituality. And then at a certain point, if we ripen deeply enough and mature, we use spirituality as the thorn to get rid of our own actually spirituality. And that's when we come into non-duality.
Yes.
So we're transcending actually the spiritual ego and having like no ego. We're neither spiritual nor are we non-spiritual. We're neither human nor are we non-human. We're actually both and neither. So it's nothing really we can actually talk about. But that's the the whole trick about talking about the unspeakable.
Well, and when it comes to the healings and stuff you do, maybe one of the last things we'll talk about is you've kind of backed off in a sense, right?
Mhm.
You don't do it as much, and why is that?
Yeah, so basically just life pushed me in that direction more and more. So you had a lot of people that you sent me, and most of them were at a point where they didn't feel they'd meet so many sessions anymore. I don't know what happened to everyone. With some, I still have contact, but with most of them, I don't. But I figured that was like one part of my intention actually with, and I never was like, oh, I'm gonna be a spiritual teacher or a guru. I might have had that on the beginning of my spiritual journey, but that fell off at a certain point. Mm. But I always had the intention that I don't want to piggyback people 10 years like down the road of awakening, that I just want to quickly help them to help themselves actually. And so to bring people to a point where they don't need me anymore. And that's pretty much what happened. So people came to me. I had the sessions with pretty much everyone you sent me. And then just organically, one after another would just not come anymore. But I was also not so engaged as to like, hey, send me new people, or tell your friends or something to book a session. And at that point in time, Noah was then also born. So my son, who's now almost 3 in October, so it kind of like just organically faded out. It wasn't like a conscious decision. Same with a lot of things on my path. It wasn't like a conscious decision. I just flowed with life, and that's just like what life brought me. Life brought me a lot of people through you, and I had a good time having sessions, and then that dissipated. And in the beginning, it was like, oh yeah, it would be nice to have a session, but then that also kind of like completely faded. Now I'm very neutral about like guiding people or having to do anything for anyone. And I do it when I do it. I love it. I totally bloom in it, and people always give good feedback and say it was nice, and I loved it as well. So the thing about the sessions is actually, it was also always for me very freeing, because I didn't have the notion that I was a teacher or a guru or something. At best, I was like not even maybe a guide, but more even actually a fellow traveler. So I never had these distance with the people that I was like further than them, even though some people would say, oh, how is it at a Lock 1000 or something? I was like, yeah, just like how it is. So I never did this kind of separation thing. And that's what I loved about the sessions, was actually that was more like a mutual friendship. It's just like us talking with no distinction of like you teaching me or I teaching you because you have more to offer than I do or whatever, this kind of stuff. And
Um,
yeah, that just died down, and now I'm just basically doing my, which is not a 9 to 5, but just basically my job. We moved. I basically lived a normal family life. Still have some resistances, adversities, and stuff. Still integrating, processing, and all the things that were happening are still happening right now. Yeah. So it's just changing appearance. Yeah. And maybe at some point in time, I don't know, some people will come again, and I will offer myself up to do the sessions. But yeah, I'm just very open to whatever's gonna happen. I'm not feeling like I need to like. When I used to start, I had a little bit more fire to like, yeah, I want to do this. I want to help people awaken. And now it's basically, yeah, I'm free falling. Like whatever's next is next, and I don't have the inclination that I can choose any of this. Although I can choose how much resistance I have or not resistance I have, depending on how aware I am at the moment. But yeah, I will just let things unfold, and if I have an intuition or an inclination to go in a direction and do something, then I will do that. If it's not there, then it's not there. Yeah.
yeah, that's the interesting thing. Is it's usually the ones who can help the most people that are not as driven.
Mm-hmm.
They what they provide is simple, very direct, and goes directly to the soul. Most are looking for a 10-step process. They're looking for a 10-day silent retreat, or they're looking for 6 months or 12 months to this, or it's kind of like a pharmaceutical company. Um, A lot of these new modalities don't want to give you a cure. They want to
Mhm.
give you something that will keep you coming back. They need clients, right? There's a lot of
Mhm.
people on this path who have left the corporate world, left their life behind. They are looking for a purpose. That purpose becomes spiritual. It becomes something they want to make money through spirituality, which is perfectly fine. They
Oh
want to
yeah, yeah, yeah.
they
That
want to
helps.
live a life of purpose, so they give people just enough, and their heart's in the right place to keep them coming back.
Mhm.
So if they skip across someone like you who can help them quickly, and like you said, your goal was to just help them and get them the hell away from you,
Mhm.
it doesn't compute to them. It's kind of like a guy I just spoke to in Scotland. He had some questions. I gave him some very simple answers, and he's like, "Well, you've done yourself out of a job." I'm like, "Yeah, I really have, because I want to
Mhm.
figure something out. Oh,
It's yeah.
I want to figure something out along this path as well, but
Mhm.
I've spent many years trying to figure out how to put a class together or 12 steps or how to keep people coming back. And every time I speak to someone or every time I help someone, um, it's very simple. It's very quick. They say it's like speaking to the soul in a sense, and they move on.
Mhm.
I don't feel comfortable having people continuously come back, or just giving them enough to have them come back next week or next month, or just enough to get them through to the next day. It's just a different
Yeah.
experience in a sense, and I have never been able to put a package deal together for people. I've never felt comfortable selling people bullshit.
Yeah, yeah, It's I love listening to you talk about that, and it's actually so interesting because it's like on the one side, it's pretty cool that we seemingly are capable to do this kind of stuff, but on the other side, it's like it's there's also a sad element I find to it that we are so ingrained with certain patterns that we think like this is how the way it should be. Like I have to meditate 10 years to awaken and this kind of stuff. So yeah, there's like one laughing and one whining eye there as well, because I do recognize that also the feedback I got from the people is that I pretty much helped everybody whoever came in contact with me, and I was pretty surprised, because to be 100% honest, I thought I didn't have it in me just to help people in that way, and I was pretty actually amazed at the feedback I got. Um, so there is still this element where I think like, I'd love to do that more in that direction, but somehow just life right now doesn't align me with that so much. Like I'm so out of capacities. I probably would do more sessions with people just because I love doing it, but just capacity wise, I'm like very socially oversaturated pretty much at the end of the day. That's why I even was a little bit hesitant when you asked me about the podcast. And I was like, I got the kids and my wife around me all day, or I'm at work where I got people. It's like I just like to chill by myself and just enjoy the silent, blissful nothingness, or just some titillation in the evening. Um, but yeah, yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, and it's yeah, I mean it's in a sense it's I think it's also good. It shows a certain level of maturity that we can't like just push through and make some idiocracy thing where we just like make a course and make hundreds and thousands of bucks just by basically putting a carrot on a stick in front of people and saying you need to do this more and more, and then you get the result. So it's cool and not so cool at the same time, I would
Yeah,
say. So
yeah,
so the people who come to us will benefit, and then the people who don't. That's okay. That's nothing. Everybody's here to learn what they need to learn. Some people will vibe with us and resonate, and other people will say, "Oh, they're full of bullshit. They're not awakened. The things they say, they can't definitely be there or something." That you will always have that. Like if you look at Christ or Buddha, they also had people who were deeply in love with them, followed them, and listened to their teachings and awoken through them, and other people who tried to kill them or whatever. I mean, nowadays we're living in a pretty safe environment. Nobody's gonna like try to put us on a cross for spreading non-duality or things like this. But yeah.
Well, to that point of relaxing, I can't believe it's been an hour and a half.
Oh yeah,
So,
already.
so one last question. Um, I think I'm going to start asking everyone this at the end. What is truth to you?
Truth is what arises right here, right now. So yeah, in a sense, I can split it up into relative and absolute. Truth just is what it is on an absolute sense, but it also is what it is on a relative sense. So that meaning, for me, just talking from a human perspective, just being non-bullshit, just like presenting yourself how you are, just authentically. And I do also think that that's a recipe to truth. On the recipe to truth on a relative realm can be just like be totally truthful, be totally honest with yourself, to others, and that will radically also will recognize you the deeper truth, the fundamental truth that's beneath all the experiencing. Yeah.
Nice, simple. We'll hour 30 and 11 seconds right now. We'll leave it at that. So
Mhm.
that's I appreciate you taking the time. Um, we will get this. I'll have to figure out how to get this uploaded to Spotify and other platforms because this is so brand new. Um,
Sure.
and I will put information in there. I'll find out from you what is the best way to contact you, or even if you do want to be contacted by the
Mhm.
people listening to this, and hopefully more people than our immediate family listens to this. And if they have questions, they can contact us. And if they want to do a transmission with you, they can contact you. But I'll put all that information once we get uploaded. And then, yeah, let's wrap it up. That's it for me. Patrick, I really thank you for everything you've done for me the last 4 or 5 years. Thank you for taking the time with this podcast, and have a good rest of your night. I think you're about headed to bed. You're about 7 or 8 hours ahead of me.
Yeah, pretty much. Like it's half to 11, so probably gonna because the little ones are up at like depending if we're unlucky at 5:15 or 6 in the morning. So yeah.
Oh man, thank you,
Yeah.
Patrick. We'll
Well,
talk to you
thanks for
shortly.
having me. I really enjoyed it, and thanks for yeah, just doing this, creating this, and having me. Really appreciate it.
Yep.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, man. I will talk to you shortly. Thanks, bud.
Bye.
See you, man.